Welcome to the 8th edition of World Intellectual Property Forum.
Hello, my name is Navneet Hrishikesan, and I'm with Cisco legal department. And today I'm going to talk to you about a very interesting topic, Internet of Things, or IoT, and intellectual property. So I'm going to share my slides with you for a second and walk you through it as we go. And hopefully you will be able to see them as we proceed. Uh, just one second, and here we go. So the first question that really comes up in these kind of a situation is what exactly is IoT, right? The Internet of Things is basically a platform or a system which connects everyday objects to each other, right, or a network. So simply put, imagine a situation where your toaster or your fridge could be connected to a network, so you could access it. We have smart bulbs nowadays, which are made by companies like my old employer, Wipro, which are, you can change the color, you can do other things to it. Now, the question that really comes up is, second question that really comes up is, why is that important? Why do we need to have products or equipments or devices on the network or on the internet? And the answer is, as the population grows in our world today, there is interesting data about how in 1960, there were basically 2 cities which had a population of more than 10 million people. By 99, that number had increased to 17 cities. And in the 2020s, we expect this number to increase to 41 cities with a population of more than 10 million people. And by the way, 7 of them are supposed to be in our country, India. And obviously what this means is it puts a lot of pressure on investments, on development, on services that companies and governments can give to people. And therefore, a lot of companies, a lot of governments are focusing on using technology to make that easier. Right? So imagine a situation where you can have all your devices on the network to be accessed and reviewed remotely by less number of people. I think that makes the process a lot more efficient and could also cut down some of the social ills that are out there with, like, for example, corruption or having to deal with people of that sort, right? As of today, I think as of 2013, the expectation is that 39% of our population in the world is online, and this number can only go further and further as we proceed. I'm not sure that was completely clear, so let me try and give you an example. Right? So this is an example from my current employer, Cisco, and it's basically a parking solution. So what it basically does is the solution is embedded into a parking garage, for example, or a parking lot, which then gathers data on what kind of vehicles came in, what time they came in, and then we are able to analyze the data to figure out various things that could be of use to the government or to the supplier of the parking garage. And what that helps is, so some of the examples are for city people, the officials in the government, this enables you to monitor the parking spaces, figure out when is the peak hour, the rush hour for the city or for that part of the locality, enables you to figure out where to invest, infrastructure, roads, how do you build bus timings, you sort out the data in many, many respects. For people like you and me, I think the biggest advantage is you could know where parking is available, right? So you don't have to roam around in circles trying to find different spots. And if you are able to look at the overall data and say, okay, between 11 to 1 p.m., there's usually free spots available in parking lot number X, you could use that to schedule your meetings, right? And make your life a little easier and avoid some of the traffic. Of course, traffic is less of an issue now with the pandemic, but I expect that is a temporary phenomenon. And obviously, for government and the police as well, this will be helpful because that allows you to view violations and take and take action to catch perpetrators. For technology companies, this is a fantastic situation because you can figure out where there is a requirement for more of these parking garages, and maybe you can go and help companies to build them. And therefore, the amount of data that you can capture from this and use to develop future services and make yourself more efficient is absolutely critical. So I hope this gives you an example of the kind of IoT solutions out there. Now, like I said, it could be a fridge which tells you when you need to buy milk, or it could be a car which tells you when it needs to be serviced. But all this comes out of the fact that they are using technology as a backbone, and they're using, in a sense, IoT uh, technology, right? Uh, so where does IP fit in here, right? And I think from our overall, we are an IP intellectual property conference today, and I did want to focus on this in clear terms. So intellectual property does come in many respects, and I will talk about a few of them. But I wanted to pick on two specific areas where IoT has a great impact, shall I say, on how we handle intellectual property concepts. The first one is obviously patents, right? Now, if you look at the concept of a patent, and this is an old concept, but the concept was really to encourage innovation, right? And I think the parable used, at least when I was in law school, was encourage innovation while providing the least possible financial benefit. Now, what's happened over the past few years, though, past few decades actually, is that patents are looked upon as being more of a complete and absolute right. And the challenge when you bring that into this piece is the concept of innovation does get hampered by this. The idea of ownership prevents you from sometimes getting into new areas of technology because there is somebody already sitting there, right, and who can stop you from getting in there. We have seen the concept of patent trolls coming up as well, a term which has been publicized thanks to a case which Cisco was involved in, the US Supreme Court. But you see people trying to monetize patents per se without necessarily giving any idea or any benefit to the idea of innovation. So that's an issue, and that becomes a particular issue in IoT because IoT is generally made, the industry is generally made up of very, very small companies doing certain specific tasks, right? So there could be a company that makes a sensor, there could be a company that makes a software that allows you to do analytics, there could be a company that does things which allow you to put a chip inside an existing device. And therefore, if you allow a situation where patents are looked upon as complete ownership rights, that prevents people from being able to work together, right? And the reality is that could be a big issue which hampers the development of this piece of technology. There have been attempts made in the past. FRAND licensing and SEP models, standard essential patent models, are a good example of industry trying to solve these issues. But that itself is not a complete solution, right? So if you look at and I'll use an example here. There's a standard called the IEEE 802.11 standard, which is for Wi-Fi, right? So if you've ever used Wi-Fi in your house or in your office or on in a public place, you have probably used the standard. A US court recently found that the 802.11 standard had approximately 3,000 essential patents inside it, right? Which begs the question whether the organizations that are the guardians of these bodies, these standard setting bodies, are they really SSOs, as they're called? Are they really doing the job, or are they allowing anybody to apply and put their patent in there, right? Because it sounds 3,000 patents for something like a Wi-Fi standard sounds a little excessive and is not really a great way for the industry to develop. So the call out really here is that we probably want to think about innovative ways here and different ways here to enable licensing and a freedom to operate, which could help kickstart this industry and help kickstart this technology that is there, so that more benefits could come to the people. So that's one on the patent side. The second piece that I wanted to dwell on a bit is on data, right? The whole concept of how this technology works is really there's an old joke about, or it's become a joke now, data is the new oil. I'm not sure how true that is. Hopefully, it won't have the environmental effects that oil has had on our world. But data suffers from a similar problem. Right? There is often a concept of ownership being implemented by different companies in the space. So, if you have ever used Facebook or Google or any of these other solutions or pieces of social media, you will find that there are often ownership terms in there which lead to certain companies claiming ownership over the data. Right? This is not the privacy data, by the way, but this is could be the non-private data as well. And the problem with that is we need a process where people can access that information. Because if you're not able to access that information or the data that's sitting there, you're not able to get the value out of it. And that's where really the technology and the area of development will come through, right? So an example if you go back to the parking area example that I gave you earlier, you will find that there are situations where there is a corporation which owns the land on which the parking lot sits. There is a company which runs the parking garage. There could be a company that puts the sensors in there. There could be a company that develops the oversight technology or the software that allows you to review the system. There could be a company that does the maintenance. There could be a company that runs the data center where the data is stored, etc. So who owns that data, right? That becomes the question. And oftentimes you will find it a problem where it becomes an issue on how do you access that data and how do you make sure that this is happening. So the second call out here is really we can expect the laws of various countries to help us in this area, but as we have seen in the social media space, for example, or the technology space, the law takes a long time to catch up. So really what's required here is for the industry to step up and for the companies involved to really step out there and build a model that works, which allows smaller companies to come in and use the data, because that's, to be honest, is where the innovation really sits. I mean, when companies like HP or Facebook or others really started in garages and dorm rooms, and that's, I think, where the future of our world is, the technology development standpoint. So that was really, and obviously there are other issues like copyright. How do you protect the code that you've written? Sometimes, the user interface needs to be protected, or you have design protections, like Apple iPhone is a good example, or you have issues like trademarks, where you protect the company itself and its rights and its marks. But really, from my perspective, these are the two areas that are probably the most important from an intellectual property standpoint. That said, there are other areas from a legal standpoint which apply. Obviously, privacy. How do you protect our information? How do we make sure personally identifiable information doesn't get out there? There is security, because if you look at some data recently from the UK Fraud Intelligence Bureau, you'll find that approximately 70% of all frauds committed are actually all cyber or online frauds. And that basically tells us that we need a strong system which protects the data that's there, especially when it's all online. And of course, product liability issues could come up as they develop, because obviously, if the car is smart and it's driving itself and it has a crash, what happens? I mean, there could be people injured or property damaged. Competition law, we've seen that come up again now in Europe, for example, with all of them looking at how large tech companies work. So that could be one area of development. And finally, this is an interesting one for those of us in technology: human rights, right? Because many of these data can be used for surveillance purposes, right? And you've seen that a lot more happen with cameras coming up and sensors coming in. How do you protect basic human rights of people, right? And does the concept of human rights need to be extended? So, for example, does privacy need to become a human right? So I think overall, very exciting times for all of us. I think an area where you can move to different topics which earlier used to be different, and they'll all converge and become a more interesting piece for us. So that is from a overall perspective. That is really all I want to talk about in this short period. I hope it was understandable, firstly, and interesting. I realize it's a short period, but I hope we have some time for questions, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the conference. And more importantly, I hope that all of you and your families are safe at this in this interesting times. So thank you again for taking the time to listen to me, and I hope to hear more from you over the course of the conference. Thank you.